we want to be able to devote more time to the things that we're passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways we can do that is building this side business and the side income and these relationships with these businesses from a content marketing perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, that will allow us to spend more time in the things that we're passionate about, which is what we started with down here in Guatemala, working for a nonprofit, for example.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, there's no single answer. The why is going to be different for everybody.
On this episode of Brews BizDev, my illustrious guest is Brooklin Nash, head of content at SalesHacker. And while we have a couple beers, we talk a little bit about sales for the culture, this great new initiative amplifying and elevating Black voices in tech sales. We also get into side gigs. That's an increasing phenomenon. Brooklyn's got a few of them. And so we talk about, great ways to stay balanced, stay focused, and keep your eye on your why while you're hustling. And also we do talk about, of course, content, how to make your B2B content more compelling and more effective. Thanks for watching. Please share and subscribe and enjoy. Hey, Brooklyn, how's it going, man? Thanks for being here.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. My pleasure, our pleasure. Before we get into the important stuff, which is the drinking, why don't you just take a moment and kind of intro yourself, 30-second elevator pitch. Who are you? What are you all about? What are you up to?
Yeah. So currently I'm head of content at SalesHacker, which is now owned by Outreach. So I'm technically a content marketing manager with Outreach, but focused wholly on SalesHacker as a channel. So heading up content across webinars, podcasts, articles, articles and social media.
Cool. Excellent. And I know there are some other gigs in the lineup, but again, we won't get into that till we've cracked the beers. But what's for anyone who doesn't know, what's SalesHacker?
Yes, SalesHacker is a community for typically B2B sales professionals. It started out as essentially a media brand, sharing tips, tricks, hacks around sales about 5 years ago, and has slowly morphed into sharing anything and everything related to sales, sales and marketing, business development. And then just under a year ago, we launched the community side. So we have close to 15,000 members. So we have an online discussion, online discussion element for people to come in and ask their questions, share their insights, and get engagement with other sales pros.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Excellent. So that being said, I've got some more questions about some SalesHacker related things, but next question is, what beer are you featuring for this episode?
Yeah, I've got Sin Novia. It's an IPA from Antigua Cerveza, local brewery here. I'm down in Guatemala.
Mm-hmm.
And it literally means without a girlfriend.
Excellent.
But it's delicious.
Yes. And you are without one, but because you have a wife, right? So
right.
Yeah, okay. Just to be clear, we're not sending signals here. This is excellent. So what I'm drinking is shit. No, I'll probably tag them.
So the context there.
Yeah, I shouldn't. Yeah. So what I have here is Yuengling. I always struggle to pronounce this traditional lager. Also amber beer, it's called for some reason. They've got a lot of different things.
It says it's a lager and an amber.
Yeah, not an amber ale, just an amber beer, which most of them are pretty close, right? I mean, that color it's kind of widespread, but so I went out specifically avoiding the things that I would normally drink, because of course in our conversation to coordinate what do we want to feature, and obviously when you originally picked what's the Guatemalan national beer called?
Gallo.
Gallo. So that was the choice, and you said, just kind of think crappy lager and go out and get something. And I was like, all right, great. I want to honor the spirit of this. So I went out, and now I don't know if this is crack. I don't think I can't remember the last time I had a Yuengling, and that's because it was a long time ago and also involved in the kind of a memory where I don't have a lot of memory left of it. If you get the drift, because that's when you drink this kind of beer, right? It's pounding stuff. It's been a long time. And so it might be wonderful. I'm going to find out here shortly, but I did get it as a crappy lager. And then you came with something way better. I think that's good for you. We'll see how it is for me.
Sorry.
Should be easy drinking. It's okay. As we chatted about before we started here, it's not the first time there's been an issue, confusion, last minute change of pace. And I mean, unlike Chris Walker, you are actually drinking with me. So I appreciate that. I appreciate the sticking to some aspect of it. So
I wasn't going to name drop, but yeah, at least I came through with the booze.
Yeah. So you're outranking him on the guest courtesy, I guess, kind of spectrum. And yeah, I don't mind calling him out. I've jumped on his post a couple times with like, oh my God, now you're doing this and you wouldn't even drink with me. It's something between funny and pathetic, and I'm gonna go with funny on that one. But all right, well, let's crack into it. And yeah.
I already have mine cracked, but it sounds great. That might have said podcasts twice a few minutes ago.
Boom, exactly. Well, cheers.
Cheers. Crappy?
It tastes like every American beer tasted like forever up until like 10 years ago, right? So it's all good. It
tastes like my college apartment.
It reminds me of like a Busch, it's kind of in that vein where it's just that straight up regular lager. It's funny, someone here earlier when we were talking about, depending on where you go, what'll you pick up? And I was like, I don't know. If he's going with a national beer, I think Budweiser would be a hilarious joke, because it's kind of like the national king of beers here at a certain level of America. They did have that there, but I went with this. And there's a lot of ones that are Pilsners. Labatt Blue, which is very popular here, even though it's Canadian. Buffalo's a hop, skip, and jump across a river. It's from Canada, and those are Pilsners. And then I got to have a Pilsner is a lager conversation. All Pilsners are lagers. Not all lagers are Pilsners. And again,
all you're telling me right now is how little I know about beer.
Yeah, excellent. Well, good. Then you're learning a lot just right now. All Pilsners are lagers. You can repeat this part, and then someone will think you're like, oh, wow, you know what you're talking about, and you don't have to.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is not bad. Not bad at all. I'm trying to think if there's something worse that I've had on this show. Besides having to drink tea the one time with someone who wanted to have tea, no. I think that took the cake. Because even when Walker bailed on the drinking, I still drank. I still drank the bourbon by myself, which is...
Fuck you, Chris Walker.
Yeah, you're not going to slow me down. But back to, so let's hit this first. Why we're having this conversation? I mean, many reasons. We're connected on LinkedIn, so I see the content you put out there. I am some kind of a member of SalesHacker, so I've been on a couple of the webinars and things like that. And sales every now and again enters into my job, so I keep that on my radar. Though I'm clearly a blend here of the inbound content-y inside sales, not I don't do cold calling, so but yeah. I appreciate what goes into it, because I have before, right? I mean, I've done door to door in the heat of Austin, Texas, selling whatever telecom kind of stuff, and I don't like that. But I do like things like SalesHacker, because the staying informed is pretty critical, especially as people come up with new ways of doing things, right? And in this world where it does tend to blend with social selling, and there's like, there's sales enablement. I mean, there's just like everything has been broken down and parsed down into some kind of little tiny sliver of what used to be all one kind of job. And so, resources like SalesHacker are very, very helpful. But particularly, I reached out because I had noticed that you were supporting, and SalesHacker is supporting, a project which has, become something called Sales for the Culture.
Yeah.
Which is about, I understand it's about elevating, Black folks and people of color in sales, in tech, and amplifying those voices and creating opportunities like that. And I know that we don't want to just spend an hour on it, because I want to have some folks who are directly involved and like amplify those voices. But why don't you just tell me a little bit about what kind of brought you into it, and what it is that you enjoy about supporting that whole initiative?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, like you said, to start, I don't want to pretend at all that this is a sales hacker thing.
Yeah.
It's not. We just are fully behind it. We want to give them any kind of support we can platform. So the way this started is Jacob reached out originally to Max, I think, and then we connected and started talking about the best way to support this launch. And he, surveyed and connected with quite a few dozen different Black sales leaders and experts and coaches to talk about what would benefit the Black sales community, like what's missing that's needed. And originally we were talking about releasing kind of a list of, 60 top Black sellers to follow, like we've done with, top female sales leaders. This year we're doing it RevOps leaders. And the consensus that came back is, a list, okay, that's fine, but that's not like, okay, that'll see a little increase for a couple of weeks and then it'll drop off, and it's not going to do a ton in the long term. So Jacob basically took it on himself to form this new community of Black sellers. And I think Morgan Ingram at JB Sales had a Slack group going. So he worked with him, with Shelton Banks, who has Rework, and their first few board members to spin this whole thing up. And really the only, we want to continue to put support behind it, but we're just kind of supporting their launch and treating them as an organic partner and giving them help anywhere we can. And in return, honestly, being able to, like any partnership, being able to reach out to their members and saying, hey, we're looking for coverage on this topic or that topic, and you seem to be the expert in this. Would you be interested in collaborating or contributing on SalesHacker? So that's the extent of it. It's been Jacob and Nikki Ivy and Shelton and Morgan and Gabrielle Blackwell, a few others, I believe, who have spun this up.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. It's I love the project, the community as a whole. And, we're having the conversation. And one of the things that I wanted to do with this pod this season is besides kind of take it in a slightly more aggressive direction. And actually it's really not besides that. It's really in line with, certain things make some folks uncomfortable, especially in spaces like professional spaces. LinkedIn as a space gets pretty uncomfortable with really anything that anyone has of any substance to say about anything life related in my experience. And so I wanted to make a concerted effort to amplify voices that have either something new to say, or the voices themselves are the kinds of voices who have been quashed. And I kicked off the season with Madison Butler, which I couldn't think of a better way to kick off a season with this point of emphasis than having her on there, and then just connecting through different people. What had when this comes out, we'll have had put out an episode with Rand Fishkin, and that's an inequality conversation we had. Like largely, almost the entire conversation is about in the funding world, right? In the venture funding world and the entrepreneurial world, all the myriad forms of inequalities that go, there. And so, it's just something that's it sounds like similarly what has you want to support that particular initiative, right, is what I'm trying to do here, which is use whatever the privilege and resources that I have to amplify voices that don't have that, and to amplify points of view that you tend to get squashed unless you actually put some pressure behind them and some credibility behind them.
Yeah.
So
I'll just go ahead and take off now then, because I'm like, privileged white guy.
Yeah.
American. I don't know if I have anything to add to that conversation.
Yeah, well, we already did that part, so we're past that part of the conversation now. I think, I don't know who the hell, which episode it was, but, we had a Black History Month conversation. It's like, hey, look, 2 white guys, let's talk about Black History Month and see how much traction we can get. But yeah, the amplification, I think, is good work. And so, and it can't all be done from the bottom up. And so I think people reaching in from different points of privilege is helpful, which is why I wanted to point to that and get that conversation out of the way first, because that's really what made me think like, oh shit, here's that. Let me go into that. Now, another thing that helped is unrelated but kind of related, is on your LinkedIn, there's a little sound thing that people can do on LinkedIn where it's like hearing how someone's name is pronounced. And so I don't know, now I think like, shit, am I gonna spoil a surprise? But yeah, I don't want to spoil a surprise, so I'm not going to turn it into a question or have you explain it. I'm just going to say, whoever is listening to this, watching this, look up Brooklyn on LinkedIn, and then click the little thing so you can hear how his name is pronounced, and then report back. I changed my mind. I don't want to spoil a surprise for everybody.
My luck is I have an easy to pronounce name, and I don't really have a need for doing the whole in the 15-second sound bite right now. Yep. We're not looking for more clients currently.
Right. Yes.
So why don't we just have some fun with it?
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And I hadn't noticed, a teammate here did, who just happened to like click through and like, oh, they're just hitting obviously more detail oriented than I am, because they're like, oh my God, that's hilarious. Have you done this? And then they did it when they called me in and they did it. I'm like, oh my God, that's great. Now there's a third reason.
Accomplished nothing else on LinkedIn. Making people smile is, that's great. That's
trailblazer with that one use. Now I got to come up with something even more clever to do with it. With mine, like, great. Now I got to do one and then come up with something good to say. Probably the same sound clip we use for this podcast, which is just short enough to not be counted as being stolen from NoFX. So it's important to know those internet rules, like how much of a clip you can get away with using before it's a problem. But so we mentioned SalesHacker, and then that's related to outreach, right? So which is technically where you work, because then they control SalesHacker, so you're there specifically. And speaking of your LinkedIn, going on your LinkedIn, there's something like, and if we pull out Revenue Collective, there's something like it's 8 through the present job listings. Now, and you explained, we pulled out Revenue Collect, and then you explained outreach, so that makes sense. So there's two of them right there, but there is another 6 that it's like you're doing content, some contract, some don't say contract. So tell us, how many jobs do you have? What is going on? Because it's either like this dude's working all the time, or he just doesn't update his LinkedIn when he leaves companies. So what's the rundown? What's the gig rundown for you right now?
Neither, actually. So number one, I should double check, because if it's not outreach or SalesHacker, it should say contract.
Yeah.
I'm head of content at SalesHacker, working for outreach, and then my wife and I run I say run a content marketing agency. I'm using finger quotes here, meaning we have currently 6 clients that we work with, a couple of freelancers where we will outsource some of the work once we get in the flow and establish what the strategy is and go back and forth quite a bit with the client first. So yeah, I mean, 6 clients, it's a range. Sometimes it's a few blog posts a month, and sometimes it's setting up their content strategy and controlling their editorial calendar and doing the whole project management for everything from individual blog posts to case studies and benchmark reports and that kind of thing. So we've got a range depending on who the client is, but yeah, we both work on that together. I just happen to be more active on LinkedIn, but
Yeah, yes.
really 50-50 or really more like 60-40 in the direction of my wife at this point, Becca.
Okay. And is she doing, and so working with those clients in the company you're doing together, is that her primary, or does she also have some other kind of main thing going?
Yeah, that's her primary role. So
Okay.
both, I mean, it's maybe about 30 hours a week for her, 20-25 hours a week for me.
Okay.
And yeah, it's her main thing. And we have 2 toddlers at home, so it's
there's the main thing. Yeah, there's the main thing,
That's
and
the
then
main
there's the rest of it. Okay. Just out of curiosity, not really biz dev related, but you are, as you mentioned already, in Guatemala, which is I didn't notice in all the postings or anything until when you suggested the beer when we set this up. I said, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm thinking like, oh, you're on the West Coast, like you're in California or Washington or something somewhere. So did you, have you been down there the whole time? Like what has you be in Guatemala remote working for what seems like some West Coast companies?
Yeah, very long story short is we came here almost 7 years ago to work for a nonprofit. Worked there for a few years. Becca worked in the school and in the orphanage here in Guatemala, and I worked more on the admin side, fundraising and social media and all of that. And then we were both kind of working and living in the orphanage at the same time for a good portion of that. And then, as things happen, whether it's a business or a nonprofit, shit kind of hit the fan, and we decided to take a step back from that. We also adopted around the same time here locally in Guatemala, our youngest daughter, and just decided that we wanted to focus on, I mean, we're still very passionate about orphan care and family-based care, but we just wanted to take some time to focus on our family and doing it within doing it. It's a poor choice of words, but not continuing to spin our wheels and get burnt out, but instead, go through the adoption process, take time for our family and reassess what's important to us. So we stepped back from that. I guess it's now almost 3 years ago. And I jumped into content marketing full time. I had been doing it part-time the whole time since I finished my master's, just to essentially pay off student loans and support ourselves while we live down here. And just decided to jump in full time right after quitting the nonprofit. And that my goal when we quit the nonprofit was, I think not the conservative, the audacious goal was to make $40,000 my first year going like full time into all this. So it was a worthwhile jump.
Nice. Yeah, that's quite the story. So you've gotten into the position you're in now, and then many positions if we're looking at like, kind of contract gigs. So what's some advice? Obviously, as the world has kind of adapted, had a whole bunch of adaptations to make in the last, year plus, and there's unfortunately not much of an end in sight for any time soon on those kinds of things. And then certain things I think, will endure, right? Certain aspects of certain companies and types of companies are like, oh, this work from home stuff and the adaptability of it's great. I just saw something I think earlier today about, I believe it was Goldman Sachs. Someone was spouting off at Goldman Sachs about how they couldn't wait to get everyone back in, and which makes sense for what they do and how they operate, and the kind of people they are. But I'm curious, for people who are, kind of new into this and more into a gig economy, right? I've seen the numbers on that, and that's just increasing and probably not going to just turn around immediately once people can kind of get back to normal. So for people who are navigating that for maybe the first time, or maybe it's been a while, but it has never quite set into a rhythm of any kind where it feels manageable, what kind of advice, I guess, could you give someone who's looking to navigate various sets of demands and sometimes various workloads and different sizes of workloads, like someone who's trying to navigate the world of being in a gig economy, multiple things going on without losing themselves or stressing themselves the hell out? What can you tell them?
Yeah, so you mean more balancing side gigs while also being work from home where you have zero separation.
Yeah, if you're in an environment where you're doing what you're doing and it's on you to draw the lines and manage the differences and still accomplish things across the board, regardless if one's got a main thing or not. Right? I mean, if you're at home or you're in a totally remote place from where all the work's happening, what are some good tips, some good practices to have to keep yourself semi-managed and semi-sane?
Oof, yeah. It's a good question. I should preface the answer by saying we do not have this work-life balance thing nailed down.
Of course, of course.
um, I think there's a couple of pieces to it, and one is it will only apply to some people. The first is just be very clear in what you're willing to do and be even more clear in the why behind it. I think it's very easy to get into this habit of kind of spinning our wheels and saying, this is what everybody's doing. This is what I need to do. I'm building this side gig, for example, to become a millionaire, for example, or to build this huge successful thing or whatever. And it's not this dichotomy of either you have this 9 to 5 or you're this super minded entrepreneur who will work 90 hours a week, 100 hours a week, and build the next outreach, I guess I should say, or or whatever, even if it's a multi-million-dollar marketing agency. Like that's not it's not an either or, it's a false dichotomy. If you start with what you want and what your why is, I think it becomes a lot easier to balance things out. And I guess I can just speak from our from our situation. Our why is we want more time to be able to devote. How do I say that? We want to be able to devote more time to the things that we're passionate about. And one of the ways we can do that is building this side business and the side income and these relationships with these businesses from a content marketing perspective. And over time, that will allow us to spend more time in the things that we're passionate about, which is what we started with down here in Guatemala, working for a nonprofit, for example. Yeah. And it doesn't, there's no single answer. The why is going to be different for everybody. If your why is you want to be able to spend $5,000 on a vacation every year for a 2-week vacation, work a side gig until you make $5,000, and then you can spend that money on exactly what you want to spend it on. If your why is you want to be able to retire 10 years earlier, then build something that's sustainable over the long run to get you to that goal. It doesn't have to be this thing where you work a 9-to-5 job or you're working yourself to death to accomplish this some vague sense of success.
Yeah.
now I feel like I'm reading off of a fortune cookie, but like, I don't know. It kind of pisses me off when people like talk about it in like this, I don't know, like there's this like side hustle porn aspect of social media where you have to be doing this. And, I wake up at 4:30 a.m. to do this, and this. And
Yeah.
there's a whole lot more to it. And there's days where we feel very burnt out, and then we level set, reassess, um, and then move forward in a way that's more sustainable for us for the time being. And then the other piece of it, and this is why I said it's only applicable to some, is if you have a partner, just communicate very clearly, almost on a daily basis, actually on a daily basis, of this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm working on, this is what I need today. And
Yeah.
it's tempting to kind of say like, okay, this is my schedule. We have, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. for this, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. for this, and then 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for this. But in reality, it's just kind of checking in every day and communicating with, number one, what you need, and then number two, how you can support your partner. You know what I mean? Actually flip that. Number one, how you can support your partner. And then number two, kind of what you need and where you're at with work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that, all that, because all that's going to be different for everyone as well. Right. Just like the why is very individual. The what those day-to-day dynamics are very individual. The 1 week to another, like you said, right. It's like sometimes you're hitting burnout, sometimes you're in a decent flow and that's not your experience at all. And so the communication and the partner side makes sense. Are there any things that, and again, yeah, this is not up from high on the mountain, right? This is not the law of fucking whatever. This is, Brooklin Nash saying like, hey, here's what seems to work for me. So just so we don't have to like preface any additional answers with like, this is not some guidebook to follow. This is how I do it. This is kind of what seems to work for me. Along those lines, are there any practices, and you alluded to this a little bit with the chunks of time thing, but as far as the time management, kind of practice management, are there any like tools or anything that you tend to use, or techniques, like some people, I'm in the Pomodoro technique, and some, it's like some people do time blocking, some, there's always all this shit we're trying, and there's been a lot of this stuff put out there for decades at this point. But especially when you're doing a lot of different things in a lot of different directions, it is important. Like no one else is going to manage that time for you. You're just going to end up in trouble or not getting shit done. So is there anything for like kind of time management or prioritizing or anything like that that you use, or that you can recommend as a practice to people who are just trying to get their bearings?
Yeah. No, there's not. Just because I'm terrible.
All right, good.
At that. Like the time blocking thing, in terms of using Pomodoro and like 90 minutes on and 10 minutes break or whatever, or even task management, bullet journals, all these things. I've tried multiple different options, and I just suck at all of them.
Okay.
So that's why I think what works for us is just checking in every day and every week, every Sunday saying this is what the week ahead looks like. And then every day saying this is what the day ahead looks like.
Yeah.
I will say, and this isn't like a technique, but if you're working a 9-to-5 job, quote unquote, work from home, it's not really 9 to 5. You have a full-time gig, and then you're trying to do a side gig. Like, do whatever you can to separate those out. I mean, I have 2 separate computers. I have my outreach computer, and I have my computer for my business.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have 2 different times. I mean, essentially from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., 5:30 p.m. actually, usually with a lunch break in there. I don't usually touch anything with my side business. I mean, like my wife and I will talk about it sometimes, or if there's questions like text and things like that, but I'm not opening that computer during my 9 to 5. Because I think there's something bigger there. I want to be building something bigger. I'm building relationships. This is the career. This is not about necessarily the money in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a separate time for our own business. And what works for us right now is just honestly just being willing to trade things off. I don't know if that's the right phrase, when we need to. So, I mean, I do wake up at 5 a.m. just because our girls wake up by 6:30 a.m. So if I want to have any work in before they wake up and I want time with them, I need to wake up to be able to get some work done for my clients.
Yeah.
And then same with on Sundays. Saturday is sacred for family time. Don't open the computer. Don't go on LinkedIn. It's just completely set aside for us. But then Sunday is, it's almost a full day for client work. And that's what's working for us for now. It's not going to be a long-term solution. I don't want to do it I'm not into working 60 hours for 30 years, but I'm into working 60 hours for 3 or 4 years. So then I can have the option of working 20 hours after that,
Yeah.
which is kind of the trade-off.
Yeah. And which again, and that's your version, right? So that's because here's what here's why we're doing this and what we have in mind for where this is going to go. So it's not forever, and it's not for, hopefully I only have to hustle for 6 months and then like my big break comes, it's some version in between. And what you want to end up at is a different location than what somebody else is going to want to end up with. So, and you do have time blocking. You just have a really big block in one direction. It's just very big blocks, which is helpful, right? Because especially with the main gig, some people are going to run into like, all right, well, how do I navigate that? How do I navigate I have a job and here's what they expect from me, and how do I make this not be a fucking problem where, the boss and everyone else is like, okay, well, are you really, giving us your best and all that kind of stuff? And so you draw your lines very clear to be like, this is what I'm doing with the main time. And then we work the other stuff out around it, which I assume Outreach is a fan of.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, number one, it's even in documentation and all that, very supportive of side gigs, side hustles, whatever you're going. And then the other side is, very supportive of work-life balance. I mean, very soon into COVID, they started giving the second Friday of the month off. They have a lot of check-ins and all that. So yeah, I will say the other side of that is, don't spin your wheels on things that aren't worth spinning your wheels on. Bridget, I'm going to butcher her last name. Bridget Potker, I think is how you say her last name.
Okay.
Now at Big Time Software, she was at G2. Hi, Bridget. If you ever listen to this one, she had a post that basically said, sometimes things in SaaS sales and basically anything software can feel made up. And it speaks to me. I think there's a lot of value you can provide to other people. I think there's genuine relationships, but at the end of the day, these are not the things that matter most. What matters most are, if you have a family, your family. If you have a partner, your partner. It's things you're passionate about. It's things you want to move the needle on. And I feel very lucky because right now my role with SalesHacker, I feel like it ticks those boxes. I get to form relationships, genuine relationships with other professionals. I get to kind of help, not guide the conversation. That makes me sound a lot more important than I am, but help, put some framework around the conversation and put some topics on, on stage that maybe aren't being talked about elsewhere. And that's great. And I love it. I love my job, love Outreach, I love SalesHacker, I love my team. But I can say this on the podcast because I told Colin, my manager, director of marketing at SalesHacker, this a few weeks ago. I am not going to kill myself over this job.
Right.
Some days I'll put 8 hours in, some days I'll put maybe 9-10 hours in. If we need to go the other way, sometimes I'll put 6-7 hours in and make up for it the other day. For almost anything in SaaS sales, things can wait. What can't wait is, in my situation, what can't wait is my 2-year-old daughter and my 3-year-old daughter. What can't wait is my partner.
Yeah.
What can't wait is taking time for myself even. I mean, whether that's exercise or reading or what have you. So don't kill yourself. I mean, don't kill yourself over it. I want to be sensitive with my language here.
Right. Yeah.
Right now, the 60-hour mark where it's balanced in time, where it's not necessarily interfering with family time, works for us. But that's not long term. It's the trade-off that we're making right now. Especially because toddlers are like, we sit and have snack with them, or we go on little walks with them. Like, we can't go do a lot of things. They have nap times and they have all these needs. So we're waiting a few years where we can be more free to, go on these trips and do these things.
Right. Full on adventures and yes, all day.
Now I feel like I was a tangent, but anyway.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, that's the answer to the question. And so one last, I think, question before then I let you close how you want to close is, and maybe you don't even agree with the premise here, but why is, as Dave Gerhardt would say, why is B2B content so fucking bad and boring?
Well, that was a complete 180, huh? We didn't talk about BizDev at all.
Yeah, well, B2B content, it's a part of the BizDev.
Now it is.
I use the big BizDev, the marketing, sales, customer success, strategic relationships, all of it. I work it all in.
Sorry, I should correct myself. I meant B2B content, definitely part of BizDev.
Yeah.
Conversation.
Oh, up until that at all? Yeah. Here's where I work it in at the end and be like, see, this is why I did the podcast. It still fits the theme.
Yeah, it's hard because I feel like in our little corner of the world, it can be really great. I mean, you have, brands like, Drift and Gong, and now Outreach, investing in things like Outreach on Outreach, going Meta, all of this. And it can be really good. But there's this whole other swath of B2B where it can be super technical. And it's hard to, number one, capture technical expertise in an engaging format. And number two, kind of put the investment into what's needed to do that. I mean, one of the clients we just started working with, they have their internal SMEs, their subject matter experts, whether it's a data architecture expert or, a Cloudera consultant, do the version 1 of their drafts. And then we'll come back and make it more engaging and add context and what have you. But that's hard to do. It's a hard muscle to build. So what you end up with is a lot of copycat content, number one, or just a lot of really dense, jargony content that doesn't glow and doesn't cause a spark in the decision maker. So bridging that gap is, I think, hard to do and takes investment. So yeah.
Is it what else do we think is, just to follow up here? So it takes investment, right? Because it's gonna take some time. It's gonna take some money to get the right people who can pull off bridging that gap. But assuming there is some money, so like that kind of investment's available. Because I don't think that handles everything, right? Like you can put as much money. A lot of people spend a lot of money on shit that sucks and it doesn't work. So
good point.
For what would people need to do, like in your view? I mean, I know what my opinion is, and we tell people, I mean, we're a marketing agency here, right? And people are like, how can you tell people what we would tell them? And it's like, we don't, like I don't, that's, for you and your sales and then your customer service, like you get into that nitty gritty shit. Like no one goes searching for that. Like no one, they're asking different questions than you're answering. That's our job. Our job is to figure out kind of like what those middle parts are, so that to know what people are looking for, how they're searching, and then the kind of content they'll actually engage with. And you get more complex as you go, right? So like as you get closer to it, then it gets more complex. We do a lot of B2B stuff ourselves, professional services. And then your team comes in with the knowledge that they actually need to figure out how it's all going to work. So, but as you said, that's a challenge. Investment's part of it, money's part of it, having the time and money to actually figure all that stuff out. But assuming like someone is getting paid to figure that out, whether it's internally or it's, you've got an agency or whatever it is, what are some good ideas? What are some simple principles? What is some place someone can start if they've got some money to bridge the gap between expertise and implementation and actual content that seems interesting and engaging enough for someone to stop scrolling or click that search result?
Mhm.
What's the answer here, Brooklyn?
What's the answer? Let's solve B2B marketing right here, right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want this to sound trite, but I think there are so many opportunities in not every B2B brand and B2B product this will work, but in a lot, I think it will. Connecting your product to the content that you're creating. I'm not talking about product marketing, I'm talking
Yep.
about content marketing, but driving the content based off of the product that you have. And I don't know, like with a few of our clients, like I said, one of our clients, it starts with SMEs. They're professional services for cloud platforms and data architecture, and they start with the SMEs. Another one of our clients, they have a whole platform on ad tech and ad spend and spending insights for advertising, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in both of those instances, all of the content is focused on what they're offering. So with this client that does advertising data,
Mm-hmm.
all of our content is based off of how people and companies are spending on advertising, from programmatic to out of home, for example. And that is super helpful, not just for go to market, but also for customer marketing and and engagement.
Yeah.
So anytime you can essentially showcase the value of your product in your content, I think you're going to end up with better content. And maybe that sounds super simplistic, but I think that's overseen a lot. Like people will, I don't know, be solving for one element of account-based marketing, for example, and then try to, if you're talking about SEO, for example, rank for all these keywords related to ABM when it's already so competitive.
Yeah.
Instead of, ranking for or focusing on content that will drive more qualified leads.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like Wizza, for example, that was the startup I worked for before Outreach.
Okay.
Instead of going after any general lead generation keyword, we went after bottom of the funnel, long tail keywords that would drive both traffic and qualified leads. So instead of something like lead generation on Sales Navigator, or even just LinkedIn Sales Navigator, it was how to export emails from LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So when we saw traffic, and I think we saw like 30-40% conversion off of that page, because it's exactly what the solution was, and it's exactly what people were searching for. And it's not always that simple. I mean,
Right.
it was a very simple, direct, focused solution, which meant a very simple, focused, direct content strategy. But in general, if you can match those things, I think you're going to be better off.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. No, I asked a overly simplistic question, so I expected, simplistic answer, and I think you actually, like you hit a point that isn't necessarily what people do think of. Like that's not the go-to simplistic answers. So yeah, no, that's cool. All right. So the last thing is I don't have a question that I end this thing with. I let people end it however you want to end it. So you get to, number one, tell us where we can find you in whatever version of that or in whichever location in your case that you choose. And then, what's one thing, knowing that we have a mixed audience of all sorts of biz dev kind of activities, like what's one thing that you want to leave people with, promo, inspirational message, like whatever the fuck you want it to be, take us out.
Sure. Yeah, you can, if you want to talk about SalesHacker and contribute, Brooklin at saleshacker.com. I'm obviously on LinkedIn, search Brooklin Nash. I don't even remember what my URL is. Yeah, and then for otherwise, I'm just at Brooklin at nashcontentconsulting.com. We have a very creative name for our business.
Yes.
One thing to leave people with. Oof. Honestly, this is going to be a reminder to myself just because it's not like I never do it, but just like freaking get off LinkedIn at 8 p.m. Like don't get off Clubhouse, get off Twitter, like whatever it is that's, I'm not even saying social media or get off your phone or get off screens. I'm just saying like your professional networks. You do not need to be engaging with a professional network, whether it's on Twitter or LinkedIn or Clubhouse now, at 8 o'clock or at 4 o'clock on a Sunday or Saturday. Like it can wait. Other things in your life, and it's going to be different for every single person, can't wait. So just like spend more time on those things.
Yeah. Nice. That's on the theme. Nicely. Well said, and enjoyed the conversation. I think we covered enough bases to make this a wild, rambling conversation like I like to have. So I know sometimes the guests are caught off guard by that. So appreciate you rolling through. Appreciate you having a beer with me. And yeah, we'll be seeing you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Yeah. Brews BizDev is hosted by Paul Greiner and produced by Renown Creative. Check us out at renowncreative.com. Are you fucking kidding me?